Adam Scher, back from the All-Star break. Had a nice little time off. You enjoy yourself?
Yeah, had a good time. Got bored pretty quickly though, so I'm excited that we have baseball again.
All right.
How was your
Excited to be right in the deep dive, huh?
break? I didn't have to do that, so
I know you got a whole week off of the deep dive.
yeah. I'll have to write it tomorrow, but then I get Sunday off also. So
It's not bad. I was
yeah,
writing some NFL seasonal content with Spags over the break, which you should check out. It's on the site. It's free. It's all free under the NFL tab. Doing some seasonal NFL content, team previews, a whole lot of different stuff. So check that out. Let us know what you think. We've got 13 games, man. Before we get into any of this, do we have any weather that concerns you?
no, everything actually looks pretty good, so that is nice not having to deal with that.
All right, let's dive right into it then. We're covering 13 games up till 6 o'clock and handing it over to the live before lock boys. Toronto, New York Yankees, Domingo Germán, Aaron Sanchez. Every time I see the A, I think Anibal. But Aaron's much worse, and he's just
Yeah,
been god awful. 7.1 implied total for the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. They're monster favorites, heaviest favorites on the slate. Before we get into the offense, let's talk about Domingo Germán because his ownership projections are obviously very low, but he is a pretty solid strikeout pitcher. He is facing a Toronto team with a top 7 K rate, bottom marks in WOBA WRC plus against righties. He is a huge favorite. They do have one of the lowest totals on the slate. What do you make of Herman here?
it's pretty slate dependent for me. I have a hard time getting him at 10,100 on DraftKings, not because of his talent or even because of his matchup, but just because he threw 80 pitches in his first start back from the injured list. We know the Yankees really don't have any reason to push him too deep into the game. So, if you're going to get 90, 95 pitches from someone, that's perfectly fine. But it's an elevated price tag and you need a lot to go. You need him to be efficient over that time. Whereas on FanDuel, he's only 8,600. On Yahoo, he's, I believe, 47. Both of those salaries are a bit easier to work with. So on those sites, I'm more interested.
Especially given how much more expensive someone like Garrett Cole is.
Exactly.
But then you also have Robbie Ray. We'll get to him shortly. Where it, I had mentioned on DraftKings, it's like they thought he was pitching at Coors Field against the American League All Stars with that price. It doesn't make any sense. But there he is. We'll get to that a few games from now. But what are your thoughts on the Yankee hitters here against Sanchez? Because obviously, Sanchez has always been worse against lefties. This season, he's been garbage against righties too, though. No strikeouts, like sub 15% K rate. Um, not the most power, but an ISO approach or a WOBA approaching 380, an XFIP above 6. I mean, these are not good numbers if you're Aaron Sanchez.
Yeah, and going into Yankee Stadium, so you get the short porch and right for guys like Hicks and Gregorius, lefties, and he's struggled with lefties throughout his career. But like you said, he hasn't even been good against righties this year. And if you go by pitch type and break it down a little bit further, the Yankees have a lot of guys that hit the right-handed sinkers, two-seam fastballs well, and that's really what Sanchez relies on to keep the ball on the ground. So the fact that he's not striking righties out, and the Yankees have a lot of guys in their lineup that have shown the ability to get sinking fastballs off the ground and hit them for power, certainly scares me. Sanchez also walks a lot of guys, which isn't really what you want to be doing when the number 7 hitter in an order is Gleyber Torres. They just have power everywhere throughout this lineup. So it's not like there's a good chance Sanchez just happens to walk a couple guys and then get out of it because he gets to the soft spot of the order because there isn't one. So really, really, really tough spot for Sanchez. I like the Yankees spot here.
Okay, you said it scared you. For a moment there, I thought you were talking about going to Sanchez here.
No, no,
Okay. All right. You struck some fear into me for a second. Any interest in Toronto hitters?
not really. It's a slate where on DraftKings in particular, pricing is really soft. On Yahoo, we always can find those $7 to $10 values to fill out lineups. And on FanDuel, kind of the same thing. You can always find values anyway. So I don't really think that on any site today there's a real. It's really difficult to find value. We know Toronto has power in their lineup, but 26 offenses going today. There's plenty of power in a lot of spots, and most of it's not overpriced. So I don't really feel the need to be taking guys against Herman with any frequency.
There are a lot of value hitters, but there's also a lot of value pitching as well. So You're right. You don't really need to go to a spot like that really isn't favorable. Let's talk about Baltimore and Tampa Bay, Dylan Bundy and Yanni Chirinos. What are your thoughts on the pitching matchup? Obviously, Bundy's a high upside guy. He's one of the most volatile pitchers in the league. I don't even think that's up for debate anymore. He's allowed 20 home runs on the season, but he's striking out north of a batter per inning. He's got one of the higher K rates on the slate. It's just the splits against lefties and righties have been bizarre this season. I could go on forever with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a price tag where there's upside just because he can strike guys out, but I'm not really getting to him all that much because the game is in Baltimore. If it were in Tampa Bay, I'd be a little bit more interested because the park in Tampa would help to downplay the home run issues a bit. But that's not the case. It's hot and humid here in Baltimore. It's a favorable spot for hitters, and there are four lefties in this lineup. And you mentioned the splits this year. He's really not allowed as much power to lefties as righties, but I don't really have a reason why that continues, especially because he hasn't been striking lefties out. So it's not like he's getting more swings and misses or anything. Like, they're just not hitting the ball over the fence for whatever reason. So it's just not the way the lineup sets up. I'm not really that excited to get the Bundy. I'd rather get to guys like Austin Meadows, get to some Tommy Pham, Yandy Diaz. Nate Lowe hitting fifth is inexpensive as well.
Yeah, and last I looked, Tampa's going to have some ownership.
Yeah, I would expect them to, just because favorable park shift. They have a 5.5 implied run total. They have plenty of power in the lineup, and it's another team that just really isn't expensive. On DraftKings, the most expensive hitter in the lineup is Kevin Kiermaier hitting third at 4,600. Beyond that, there's no one even that expensive, and so you can basically stack Tampa up again. A home run prone pitcher in Bundy against a poor Baltimore bullpen, and then still do whatever you want with the rest of your lineup.
All right. What about Chirinos? I mean, on DraftKings, I don't really have any interest in paying that much for him. He is cheap on FanDuel, though. Is there any? I mean, God, you look at some of these. Chirinos 68, Kenta made a very difficult matchup, but 68. Sonny Gray 68, Vargas 68. A lot of cheap pitching on FanDuel, and of course Lamet down there at 56. Does anything stand out to you when it comes to Chirinos at that price?
I think Chirinos is probably my favorite out of the $6,800 group, just because he is facing the Orioles. He is fully stretched out. You're likely to get around 100 pitches from him, so you don't have the concerns that you used to have where he's coming in out of the bullpen and not getting quality starts or whatever. And he's not pitching in Coors Field like Sonny Gray is. He's not facing the Red Sox like Kenta Maeda is. So while I don't think he's as good as Gray or as Kenta Maeda, I think the matchup's just really favorable. But on FanDuel also, like you said, you have Lamet, who is $1,200 less expensive. So I would still rather get to Lamet than Chirinos with the savings. And then on DraftKings, I just don't really see the need to get to an $8,400 Chirinos. I don't really see the need to pay up for him on the two pitcher sides.
Neither do I. It's totally unnecessary. I don't have a problem with it at 68. There's another guy we'll talk about in that same price range later. What about hitting? You mentioned Meadows and Pham, and I know Choi, on last I looked at least, on FanDuel was projected to have quite a bit of ownership, one of the top 5 ownerships on the slate, but I don't believe he's in the lineup.
Yeah, so he's not in the lineup.
Yeah, so that changes things. Kiermaier batting third, though.
Yeah, nice lineup bump for Kevin Kiermaier. Not the prototypical number 3 hitter. Not the best hitter in the lineup, but he does have some power. He has some speed, and it's a favorable park. So he's someone that is probably going to be contrarian somewhat, just because he's an outfielder, and he's at a price point where there's a lot of other good options. But Austin Meadows really stands out. Leading off, the price tag's come down. He's $9 on Yahoo, which is just it's way too cheap. So he's a top value over there. But even where he is priced more reasonably, he's still in a solid spot here against Monday.
I was hoping Zunino would be in the lineup just to get a punt with power against a homer prone righty, but
had in my initial crunches earlier, I had 20% Zunino.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really good spot, and he's just cheap, so it opened things up. But d'Arnaud isn't nearly as cheap as him, and it's a lot less appealing. Let's talk about Boston and the Dodgers. Kenta Maeda, Eduardo Rodriguez. Neither of these guys have friendly matchups whatsoever. I mean, there's nothing you could say that's encouraging about the matchup. The only argument maybe you could make, and I don't even think it needs to be made, meaning I don't think you need to go here, is Kenta Maeda is really cheap on FanDuel. But even so, man, like it's just really hard to have interest in either of these guys in their respective matchups, even though both of them are very good pitchers.
Right. I mean, if you gave me Kenta Maeda at 6,800 on DraftKings or at the equivalent on Yahoo, then I'd be kind of interested since you need the two pitchers,
Sure.
and maybe you could just go to him because of talent. But on FanDuel, you're only rostering one pitcher. You have Lamet for 1,200 less in a tough matchup. If that's what you're looking for, you have Torinos at the same price if you just want a better matchup than the Red Sox. Like Maeda certainly could have a good game just based on talent here, but the Red Sox are about as difficult a matchup as in terms of production and in terms of strikeouts. So I just don't really see the need on any site based on roster construction and pricing why I really need to get to Kenta.
What about hitters, though? I mean, both are good pitchers. Do you have any interest in bats from this game, or is it a wash?
Yeah, I talked about it with Josh. Like, I don't love any of the bats individually, but I do think both of these teams are really good tournament stacks because they're both just such talented offenses. And I think you're going to see a lot of ownership rightfully going to the Yankees, going to Tampa, going to both sides of cores. And maybe both of these teams go a little bit overlooked. And especially in these larger field tournaments, I told you, and I actually did on the show this morning, I'm not planning on stacking on DraftKings today because of the way the pricing sets up and because of how top heavy their main, $6 tournament is. But if you are, these are two teams I think I would be really interested in getting to just because they both have so much power throughout their lineup. The Dodgers are back to basically fully healthy with Seager, Freese, and Pollock back in the lineup. And the lefties in here all hit left-handed pitching well. Rodriguez isn't lights out against lefties. So it's a spot where I think you're just going to get really low ownership on teams that have as much talent as any offense on the slate.
Okay. What about pricing? You all right with the prices on these guys? Some of them have definitely come down.
Yeah, I mean, the whole slate is mispriced kind of, but on DraftKings you have Mookie and JD still at 46 and 4,400. Like Devers and Bogarts are the only hitters over 5K. Devers, I think, fine anyway. Like Maeda isn't anywhere near as good against lefties as righties. And then you look at the Dodgers, and the most expensive hitter is Cody Bellinger, who just crushes pitching from either side. He's only 5K, which is like 10% cheaper than he has been most of the season. You get Pollock back at a discount. You get Justin Turner still reasonably priced. I think that both teams are cheaper than they should be, but that's also the case for just about every team on the slate.
All right. Let's keep it moving then. We got a lot of games to touch on. Cleveland and Minnesota. Mike Clevenger, Kyle Gibson. Yeah, I was seeing ownership and high projections on Clevenger. He bounced back really nicely after two really heinous outings since being activated off the injured list. He went 6 scoreless with 9 Ks, only 4 hits allowed against Kansas City. Now you've got him, though, in a spot against the Minnesota team that leads the league in WRC+, tied with the Angels against right-handed pitching. A team that ranks number 1 in isolated slugging by a wide margin at 233, a 350 weighted on base average. I mean, which, by the way, is second in baseball behind only the Red Sox. This is not a particularly easy matchup for Mike Clevenger. You've got Max Kepler, Polanco, Cruz, Gonzalez batting cleanup, Garver. The interesting thing about this Twins team is the bottom of the lineup does have some bats that have finally begun to hit this season. What do you make of Clevenger here?
It's not as tough a spot as it would have been other times this year because CJ Cron and Eddie Rosario are both out for Minnesota. You do get some strikeouts here with Nelson Cruz, Marwin Gonzalez, Mitch Garver in particular in the middle of the order, but it's still just not that great of a spot. Like the hitters on this team who aren't very good aren't high strikeout guys either. Like if you look
Right.
at Marias, you look at Adrianza, both of those guys are lower strikeout guys. Polanco is really tough to strike out. So you get the strikeouts from Cruz, Gonzalez, Garver, Sano, and to some extent Buxton. So without Rosario, without Cron, it's a bit better matchup. But I still just have trouble getting to Clevenger when you have Caleb Smith, who's $1,000 less on DraftKings. You have Ray, who's even less than that, and then you have Garrett Cole at the top. On Yahoo, you have Clevenger at 51. Smith is $6 less. So it's just tough to get to Clevenger at this price point, even though I think it's not quite as bad a spot as it normally would be.
Yeah, it's definitely not as bad. It's also not good. I mean, even Buxton's only striking out at 21.8% against righties this year. So
Right.
nothing close to what he was before. He's actually evolving into a pretty decent hitter. Actually, he's got 24 doubles on the season. The guy just racks up doubles, and he's hit the ball well. So I don't love this spot at all. Do I understand if people want to go here? Sure. But I also think there's plenty of pivots on this 13 gamer that I don't know if you need to take that risk. I'm assuming you're not super high on Kyle Gibson either.
No, I'm not. There's just a lot of lefties in this lineup for Cleveland. There are a lot of lefties that don't strike out a lot. Gibson has a strikeout percentage against righties that's between 3 and 4 points higher than it is against lefties. I don't think it's all that likely that Gibson gets blown up. So if he ends up in some lineups just as, a cheap SP2 or whatever, I think it's okay. Have near the strikeout upside that Robbie Ray does at a similar price point. If you can find the money to get up to, Smith as well, nowhere near the strikeout upside for Gibson. So I'm not really getting to much of him. From the Cleveland side, though, I don't love their hitters either. I do have respect for Gibson. Lindor is my favorite guy from Cleveland, but overall, I'm not getting to a whole lot.
I don't really like any hitting in this game.
Yeah, Minnesota sort of falls into the same category as the Red Sox and the Dodgers for me, where they're just not going to have ownership and they have a lot of talent. But I would still rather get to the Red Sox for the Dodgers.
So would I. Miami and New York Mets is an interesting one because you have Caleb Smith, who, based on his price tag, he's so underpriced pretty much everywhere. This guy is going to give you good numbers almost, I won't say all of the time. And the Mets are a decent team against lefties, but look, he's got a 31% K rate, 15% swinging strike rate almost. Both-handed hitters, he's holding to 290 or lower with weighted on base average. He's keeping runners off the bases, and the big thing here is he's really used Marlins Park to his advantage. Of the 15 home runs he's allowed, 2 of them have come at Marlins Park. So he's taken the spacious outfield and really exploited it because a 13-2 ratio is pretty big from home and away games.
Yeah, and I think that him pitching at home is a big deal, like you said. His strikeout stuff is great. He's struck out about 31% of hitters this season. The only real flaw that he has is that he'll give up power to righties, but this park does a good job of mitigating that. So it's not as risky. The Mets do have 6 hitters in their lineup that, since the start of 2017, have a WRC plus of at least 100 against left-handed pitching. Some of them have been really good. Alonso so far at 194, Ramos at 142, McNeil at 140. Small sample size on him too, but Rosario's at 113, Frazier's at 105, Conforto's at 102, JD Davis is at 99. So it's not a bad lineup whatsoever. If Smith were at Clevenger's price point, I think it would cause some hesitation, but you're getting a discount on a guy that, if you exclude Clevenger and Chavez because of sample size, he has the second highest strikeout percentage on the slate. So the upside is clearly there.
I just excluded Clevenger and Lamet. Well, they both thrown less than 25 innings this season. So yeah.
Yeah, and I meant Lamet, not Chavez. Sorry.
So I didn't even hear you, but yeah, I knew where you were going with it. Smith has top 5 numbers in almost all these categories if you remove those 2 from the equation. So there's just not much reason he should be priced where he is. I don't think he should be that much cheaper than Herman, or, on DraftKings, he's $1,200 cheaper than Lamet. That's crazy. So right. I'm going to go ahead and look to exploit that for sure. Of course, we will get to Robbie Ray, but I think this is a really good spot, not because of the matchup, but because of the park and the upside for a guy like Caleb Smith. To me, is well worth it. What about we got to talk about him, man. Jason Vargas.
If he has a good game, it's not like it would be shocking. He's facing Miami, but I'm just not interested in paying almost $8,000 for Jason Vargas. The guy has one good pitch. When he's able to get swings and misses on it, he can have a good game, but it's not like he's got good numbers overall this season. He's struck out 19 to 20% of hitters. 20.7%, 10% walk percentage, 4.92 xFIP. He has to come back to earth eventually. There's just nothing that points to Vargas being one of these pitchers that is just going to outperform his numbers all season long for any reason that makes sense. So, I get the matchup is favorable. I get the park is favorable, but outside of that, I just don't have any reason for why I would like Vargas.
I'm with you. I do not see it whatsoever. And I've been assuming he was going to come back down to earth for a while now, but it has yet to happen. Maybe it'll
In
be.
my initial DraftKings crunch, I got like 2% Vargas.
Do you have any Marlins bats, or do you just find it wholly unnecessary based on all of the crazy pricing today?
Yeah, I find it pretty unnecessary to be rostering like a $4,200 Garrett Cooper when you can get a $4,400 JD Martinez or something like that.
Exactly. All right. Let's talk about Texas and Houston. Another interesting game. Look, honestly, I don't know, it feels like we've been through we're through 5 games so far, and we've really, outside of the Yankees and maybe Tampa Bay, just talked about a lot of pitching.
Again, why I'm stacking or not stacking on DraftKings today.
Yep. Yeah, there's going to be a few teams that are just way more popular than everybody else. Houston probably going to get some love here. Garrett Cole, Jesse Chavez. I mean, Cole has double-digit strikeouts in more than half of his starts this season. His numbers are insane. He leads the slate in K rate. Probably leads the league in K rate now that I think about it.
He does.
Yeah.
He leads qualified starters by a lot.
Yeah. I'm not talking about Clevenger and his 3.5 starts, but it's also in Texas. I just think, somebody like Garrett Cole, he's allowed 17 home runs, but 14 of them have been solo shots. He obviously has a low whip for a reason. And I just wouldn't be surprised to see him give up 2 solo home runs and end up still striking out 11.
Right. And the Rangers are running out another left-handed heavy lineup. The only righties in it are Andrus and Fedorovich. And Cole, since last year, has struck out over 40% of left-handed hitters. He's only allowed like a 147 expected ISO to lefties. It's not like him facing a bunch of lefties is a disadvantage for him. So there's nothing to dislike here outside of the ballpark. And, there is some home run risk, but it's a slate where there's some cheap pitching that you can pair with Cole. There's plenty of cheap bats or overall just cheap stacks that you can get. I'm getting around 25% Cole in my initial DraftKings crunch. We have him right now projected for less than that. I'm not sure exactly where we have him, but it's less than 25%, 13%. So yeah, I mean, if he comes in around 13 to 15% and I can get, twice the field on him, I feel pretty good about that just because he does have the best strikeout stuff of any starter in baseball.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Jesse Chavez, not so much.
Yeah, pretty brutal spot for Chavez. Obviously, just not a lot of strikeouts for Houston. He's been decent, but against righties, he's always kind of had some issues with power. This year, he has struck out a much lower percentage of righties than lefties. He's at about 20% against righties. He's 4K flat on DraftKings, so I can see getting the sum of him just because of what it gives you in the rest of your lineup. But because of how cheap hitting is, I don't know that he's really that necessary.
What are your thoughts on these Houston hitters?
Yeah, so I mean, Yordan Alvarez I really like, but I mentioned that Chavez has, really had issues with the right-handed power. So Altuve's appealing, Springer's appealing. It really sucks that there's no Alex Bregman in the lineup. That does weaken Houston's lineup. He was one of my favorite bats. And then don't sleep on Chirinos batting 7th as a catcher with upside, especially since we don't have Zunino on the slate. And, if you are stacking Houston, Josh and I talked about it today that including one of the first basemen is a good way to be contrarian because you have Gurriel, who might be the most expensive hitter on DraftKings. I didn't actually check that, but I know he's more than like Yelich and Trout. But
so
he's same price as Blackmon.
Gurriel is the tied for the highest with Fernando Tatis Jr. and Blackmon.
Right. So a really high percentage of Astros stacks aren't going to have Gurriel. They're going to have 1 through 4 and then, like Chirinos at catcher or something. But they're also probably not – there's going to be a lot of Astro stacks that don't have Tyler White because he's not very good and because he's hitting 8th. So I think that including Gurriel or White are ways to be contrarian within your Astro stack.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Now, it may seem like a ridiculous question, but given the park factor and ownership, do you have any interest in any power bats for the Rangers?
I would if – the pricing were different on the slate. It really just comes down to, Joey Gallo is a phenomenal upside play, but So is Cody Bellinger in a more favorable matchup. So are a lot of guys that aren't going to have a lot of ownership on a 13-game slate and are in the same price range as Gallo. Um, there is home run upside. It's just that I think you can get similar ownership and similar pricing on a lot of other guys that aren't facing Garrett Cole on this particular slate.
Okay. Hey, by the way, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. Would definitely recommend that everyone go over there if you haven't already. If you've been a viewer of the Deeper Dive, you're probably already over there on Yahoo. But if you aren't, here's a quick way to get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points when you sign up. Yahoo Sports Rewards points are as good as money, as good as cash. You can use them on the site to win, to play, to withdraw money, all that good stuff. And this is how you sign up. Go over to awesomeo.com and check out the Spotlight Hitters article. The Spotlight Hitters article, you'll click that. It's free. And right at the top of it, you will see a link to Yahoo DFS. Our boy Emax sets it up every day, throws the link in there, gets you good to go. So when you make your first deposit, you'd be eligible for $30 of free play or Yahoo Sports Rewards points upon depositing. So check it out. There's no multi-entry or no mass multi-entry, no 150, 10 max. It makes it so if you're hand building lineups and you're not trying to compete against guys throwing in that many lineups every day, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is one of the best places, well, probably the best place to do it. They're the proud sponsor of the Deeper Dive. Check it out and use the link in the Spotlight Hitters article. It's free. You'll find it on the homepage, and the link is inside there. All right. We've got 7 more games to go. We make our way to Miller Park. Chase Anderson, Sean Anderson. We have 2 matchups today where the guys have the same last name. Interesting. You know what?
Oh, yeah, Gray.
That's right. Old Dan Strafford pointed that one out on the early bird. So can you guess Sean Anderson's K rate and swinging strike rate against lefties?
Like 12%. Lower than 12%.
What was the swing? What was the second one?
Lower than 12%.
For the K rate? Okay, what was the swinging strike rate?
Something small. I'm guessing the K rate's like 12.
So he has an 8% K rate against lefties and a 4% swinging strike rate. In case you're wondering, those aren't spectacular numbers. And now we'll have to face Yelich, Grandal, and Moustakas in the 2-3-4. Eric Thames batting 6. This is going to be a rough go for Anderson, who doesn't have the luxury of pitching at Oracle Park, where it has clearly masked a lot of his inadequacies. Dude, I think he gets in trouble here.
Yeah, so do I. You have Braun back in the lineup too, which, he's not a lefty, but he is another bat that has some power and just makes the lineup a little bit deeper. Grandal, Yelich, and Grandal and Yelich in particular, I really like. Yelich is another one who's just priced 10% cheaper than normally is for no real reason. He does have potentially, lingering back spasms, but that's not really something that I'm going to guess at if they're bothering him or not. I assume if they were still bothering him, he wouldn't be playing. So, I really like him and Grandal. Moustakas is great. Thames is great. It's another lineup that's just really, really deep. You can mix and match if you're looking to 5-man stack, and you can't really go wrong with them.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I have to ask about Chase Anderson just because it's a real low total for San Francisco, but it's hard to see much of a ceiling here.
Yeah, I'm getting there on DraftKings just because of the price. Like, he's 6,300. He's facing the Giants. I don't expect a lot of strikeouts, but it's also just not that scary of a lineup. Most of the hitters that you'd be afraid of on the Giants are left-handed. Brandon Belt, Dickerson, Crawford, Panic. Like, I use scared very loosely on the last 2. But Anderson's done a really good job of limiting power to lefties. And from the right side, you have Longoria and to some extent Pilar that have power. Posey doesn't really have it anymore. Austin Slater is really a major league hitter, or probably wouldn't be a major league hitter if he wasn't on the Giants. So it's just a price play where I'm not really excited about it, but I'm fine if I get to that 20-25% where he's projected to be on.
All right. Any bats on the other side of that one?
Longoria is my favorite, but I just find it really difficult to get there. On FanDuel, I think it's a little easier at 2,800, but on FanDuel, stacking is also a bit more important than it is on DraftKings. So it's tougher to get to Longoria without having two or three other Giants with him.
All right. Kansas City, Detroit. Danny Duffy, Turnbull. What are your thoughts on Duffy, honestly? Because he's clearly going to have a lot of ownership, and I get it. I mean, this is a really bad Detroit team, bottom 4 in WOBA, ISO, WRC+, all 3 of them across the board against lefties. Despite their righty-heavy presence, they've still been bad. Now, on the other hand, Duffy's got a 17% K rate against righties, so, I mean, it's kind of a give and take here. Which one do you think wins out? I tend to lean Duffy, but the ownership is a little bit concerning. I think, the biggest thing here is talking about him on DraftKings, where he is much cheaper than everywhere else.
Right. He's a good point per dollar play. Like his median projection is good. The concerns I have are that, like you said, he's not striking out a lot of righties. He's facing an entirely right-handed lineup with the exception of Kristen Stewart. And while Detroit is bad, you do have, Castellanos, who's a good hitter. You have Cabrera, who's tough to strike out. Brandon Dixon, hits the ball hard. I don't really know what else to say, but it's not like I just really like rostering really popular pitchers who are popular simply because of their price point. That like he's not a really talented pitcher. There's not a whole lot about this is appealing, or it makes you think he's going to have a ceiling game against an entirely right-handed lineup. It's just that the Tigers are bad and his price tag's affordable, so he's going to be in a lot of lineups. So I'll certainly have Duffy across my 150 lineups, but I do expect that I'll be underweight on him if he comes in at 25% owned.
Right, that's where I was at too. I mean, I get the owner. I mean, I understand why he's going to be popular here. It's not crazy to me at all, but at the same time, I really don't love it. He's facing 8 righties. It just, I don't know. Is the ceiling high enough for Duffy in this spot? And I guess the answer is yes, but how often is he getting to that? That's really a question. How often is he getting there with that strikeout rate?
Right.
Turnbull or any bats?
Not really looking at Turnbull, at least. Not sure where he's priced on Yahoo. He's at 38 there. So I think the Yahoo price tag's okay. You do have a predominantly right-handed Kansas City lineup, only 3 lefties in there, and he's been much, much better against righties than lefties. On DraftKings, I'm not looking to pay $9K for him. I do have interest in Mondesi and Gordon in particular. They just profile for me as the best options. They both hit from the left side. They both have some power. Mondesi obviously gives you stolen base upside as well.
So Turnbull's been pretty good. It's just I don't see any use for him when you're talking about a price, like where he's priced at. Do you?
Not on DraftKings. I do on Yahoo. Like he has a 27% strikeout percentage against righties. He's allowed a 272 WOBA and a 100 ISO to right-handed hitters. So getting him at $38 against 6 righties is pretty appealing. But on DraftKings at $9K, it's just not as appealing a price tag. And I would rather just go to like Caleb Smith or Robbie Ray or cheaper.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. St. Louis and Arizona. We finally make our way over to Robbie Ray. $7,900 on DraftKings, which is just really absurd. 94 on FanDuel. And then over on Yahoo, he's also, really cheap like he is on DraftKings. You got Robbie Ray coming in at $36, cheaper than Turnbull, cheaper than Vargas, cheaper than Duffy, Mike Fiers, you name it. Look, it's not a great matchup. St. Louis is good against lefties. They have a low strikeout rate. But you're also talking about a pitcher in Robbie Ray who has one of the highest strikeout rates on the slate, one of the higher K rates in the league. Look, he's struggled with walks recently, no question, but he's still striking out a ton of batters, and he's actually pitching deeper into games. It's a good matchup, or it's a tough matchup for sure, but with a 31% K rate against righties, I'm certainly not overlooking Robbie Ray here. The problem is neither is anybody else.
Right. So the difference for me between Ray and Duffy, we talk about guys that they're not safe and they do have a lot of ownership because they're clearly underpriced. But the difference is that while Duffy is striking out, 17 or 18% of right-handed hitters, Ray is striking out about 31%. So there's at least that very, very clear path to how Ray has a big game and is someone that you need in your lineups. The scary part is that he does give up home runs. He's walked 12.1% of hitters this year, and the Cardinals have one of the highest walk percentages against left-handed pitching. It's really obvious also how it goes poorly for Ray, but the price tag I think takes a lot of those concerns out, and kind of just leaves you with more upside than downside. So if I had to choose to be overweight on one of Ray or Duffy, I expect that I'm overweight on Ray.
Right. But you're right though. The biggest factor is, could Ray go out there and give you 10 strikeouts, even against St. Louis? The answer is definitely yes. And the price, okay, Duffy's not very expensive, but compare that to Ray. Ray's, I really don't get this price. I know it's not the easiest of spots, but if you're going to price him here, how do you price Sonny Gray and John Gray up at $9K?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a really weird price point.
It's absurd.
And I mean, there's no Ozuna in the Cardinals lineup either. Like that helps. There's no Yachty, that helps. You're talking about Matt Wieters, who has a 30% strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching since 2017, compared to Molina, who puts everything in play. It's a pretty watered-down version of the Cardinals lineup.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Ray is he's just a high upside pitcher. That's all that really matters here. What are your thoughts on Wainwright? He's also
Scratched.
Oh, that's right. Who's replaced him?
Ponce de Leon.
Ponce de Leon?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to talk about him at all?
No, not really. I don't think he's that good.
Well, he's not.
Yeah. He's not someone I'm getting to. I'm not really getting to the Diamondbacks either. It's just not a team that stands out to me. Individually, I think Christian Walker is the best play from the Diamondbacks. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm just not really getting to either side there. Ponce de Leon walks guys, not a huge strikeout guy in AAA this year. Diamondbacks not the best strikeout matchup. It's kind of just a spot that I'm avoiding.
I would like to know if you have any interest in St. Louis bats, though, against Ray, because, as good as he is, he will give up some long balls, and he's facing a lot of righties.
Yeah, I mean, 2, 3, and 4 in particular, Martinez, DeYoung, and Goldschmidt, they're all affordable. They all have power from the right side. So those three stand out. If you were full stacking, then get to $2,600 beta opens up a lot for you. But if I'm just picking and choosing hitters, it's Martinez, DeYoung, and Goldschmidt.
Okay. Anything else on this game?
Nope.
Let's talk about the Rockies and Reds. So you have the matchup between the Grays. You're a big Sonny Gray guy. We may actually have different opinions today. I was hoping it would be 6, but it's still because there's no Raimel Tapia, but facing 5 lefties, Walters, McMahon, Murphy, Dahl, and Blackman from the bottom up, plus a pitcher. The only righties are Story, Arenado, and Desmond. He strikes lefties out at 31%. He's been stellar against them this season. Sub 3 xFIP, sub 1 WHIP. Really good numbers. Is Sonny Gray of any interest to you on Yahoo, where he's coming in at $33?
Yes, on Yahoo and on FanDuel. He's of interest. I would expect to be overweight if he's getting no ownership as I expect him to. But I really just don't look to take guys in Coors Field, no matter how good I think they are, especially on slates that have plenty of options to choose from. Because especially with the way the ball's flying now and with it being summer, the real reason why Coors is so tough to pitch in is because of the elevated batting average on balls in play, the huge outfield, and balls fall in. But then now you get the juice baseball that has home runs up for across the league. You get the weather that makes it easier to hit home runs, and if you give up a couple of lucky hits, it's just more and more likely that you're going to run into a 2-run home run, 3-run home run, and your day is going to be not looking good pretty quickly. So I just think that the risk in the current hitting environment is a little bit higher than I would like. The pricing on FanDuel and Yahoo does at least make it a consideration, whereas DraftKings kind of just takes it away entirely.
Right, and that's kind of where I fell as well. When I saw him at that price, you at least have to contemplate whether or not Sonny Gray will make some sense at low ownership, because he has been very good this year, especially against lefties. So 5 lefties and a pitcher, Put it this way, if this matchup were anywhere else, we'd probably have a lot of Sonny Gray today.
He'd probably be in like every lineup.
Right.
So like if we'd gotten him at like 6,800 on DraftKings, then I would have a ton because he's just head and shoulders better than Danny Duffy is, and I would take my chances. But on Yahoo, we get him at $33, which yeah, it's cheaper than Duffy, so I like him more than Duffy on Yahoo. But it's in the same vicinity as Robbie Ray and Spencer Turnbull. It's probably not that difficult to find the money for those guys. He's still $5 more expensive on Yahoo than Chase Anderson is against the Giants. It's just a really tough state, I think, to get to him. And also, I missed it, but Ponce de Leon is $25 on Yahoo as well. So he's not any riskier than a pitcher in Coors either.
All right. Let's talk about hitters here. I mean, unless you're John Gray, the only reason I mentioned Sonny Gray is because his price was way too low, even at Coors. But can't really say the same about John Gray. So let's talk about hitters. What do you have here?
This is a really weird game to me. It's really tough to like break down verbally because I think both pitchers are really good. I think the ballpark, of course, is also the best park for hitters. And the pricing, again, is just egregious on these guys. You have on DraftKings, you have a Coors Field game with a 12 total, and there are two hitters that are more than $5,000 in Blackmon and Story. So you kind of have to get to these guys, but there's just a higher probability of failure for the bats in this game than there normally is because you have two really good pitchers. So if they're both going to come in as like the two highest owned stacks or close to the two highest owned stacks, then I think that looking to some of these other really talented stacks we've talked about, whether it be the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Twins, whoever, then I think that in these large field tournaments it makes sense. But as far as chances of being the highest scoring stack, or being the best stack based on their salaries, you can't really avoid two stacks in Coors at these price tags.
I'm with you. It's the
like Scooter Gennett kind of has to be your cash second baseman, right? Like he's 38.
Yeah,
he's 38.
Of course.
You have Jesse Winker's leading off at 4K. Joey Votto is 4,100. Arenado's less than 5K. Blackmon, even at 5,400, Blackmon is not overpriced. So it's just a game where there's a lot of cash plays from this game that doesn't necessarily make them bad tournament plays, but I just don't know that these two teams are the winning stack as high as they're going to be owned.
Yeah, and neither of these pitchers are bad. I mean,
right.
It's Coors Field, so they could have bad performances, but I'm not salivating to load up on hitters against either of these guys, no matter where it is. And one of them's the Cincinnati Reds. So,
right.
Yeah, it's just
I mean,
go ahead.
If this game ends up being like 7-6 or something, that's not winning you anything.
No, certainly not.
It's not making you want to roster either pitcher, but it's not winning you anything.
Right.
It's still, as far as like point per dollar goes, if it ends up being 7-6, you get a lot of really good plays most likely. But as far as winning you a tournament, 7-6 doesn't do anything for you, and there's probably going to be a lot of the field that's on it.
I agree. All right, Oakland and the Chicago White Sox. We've got Mike Fiers on the mound, who is more expensive than Robbie Ray, like everywhere. And then Ivan Nova, pretty high total for the Oakland Athletics, one of the highest on the slate. I guess I'll ask you because I have to. Do you have interest in pitching in this game?
In pitching, no. Maybe like a little bit of Nova just because he's cheap on DraftKings, but that's it. I don't have any reason to pay for Fiers when he's the same price tag or basically same price tag as Caleb Smith, more expensive than Ray. Similarly enough price to Clevenger where I just have no reason to go there.
What about bats? Do you have any Oakland love here against Nova?
This is one game where I like some hitters, but I really don't like the full stacks. The ballpark isn't conducive to high scoring games. Neither is the weather, but I think Matt Olson's in a phenomenal spot with the platoon advantage here against Nova. I think that Chris Davis is in a great spot and still priced. And then on the other side, you have two right-handed bats in particular that have tons of power in Jose Abreu and Eloy Jimenez against a pitcher in Fiers that gives up a lot of power to righties. So there's like four bats in this game that I think are really good plays, and I don't really want to bring the rest of their offenses into my lineup.
Yep, I get it. What else on this game, if anything?
It's pretty much Olson, Davis, Abreu, Jimenez.
Okay. Angels and Seattle. Mike Leake's allowed the second most home runs on the year, behind only Justin Verlander, who talked about juiced balls himself. Uh, do you have? Well, I tell you right now, I do have interest in the Angels only because when you're a guy like Mike Leake and you're giving up home runs like that, I mean, all it takes is one of these games where you just start coughing up home runs left and right. I mean, look, he's allowed multiple home runs on so many different occasions. It's a very tough Angels lineup that he's going to have to face. Even though I don't know that it's out, I don't think it's even out yet. I can pretty much feel confident that whatever it looks like, I'll have interest.
Yeah, I'm getting to a lot of Angels. Trout, Otani, Upton, Calhoun, like the guys that you would expect to get to. But you have a pitcher that gives up a lot of home runs. You have a team that doesn't strike out and has a lot of power in that part of the order. And it's a park downgrade for Leake as far as home runs go with the new dimensions in Anaheim. So, yeah, I like the Angels quite a bit. And while it's tough to you can't roster Calhoun, Trout, Otani, and Upton together unless you're playing on FanDuel, but you still get discounted guys beyond them like Simmons and Pujols if you are full stacking and looking to get some guys that will let you get good one-offs and good pitching in your lineup.
Yeah, who do you like most here?
Trout, of course, but
Otani.
yeah, I mean anyone that plays the outfield, but Trout's number one.
Okay. On the other side, is there any interest?
Dan Vogelbach's the one that stands out
Yeah,
because
me
after
too.
Taylor Cole, you should get Felix, and you're getting a left-handed power bat in Vogelbach at a really appealing price point. I doubt that he has a whole lot of ownership because I don't expect the Mariners to be a popular stack. So getting to him individually is a spot that I like. Seager is really cheap. Rise is a catcher, which is appealing, but Vogelbach's the one that really jumps out.
I agree with that. He was the one guy that I mentioned in the deep dive today from this team. Aside from that, it's hard to fall in love with anyone. Hey, by the way, use the code Deeper Dive to get 50% off your first month at Awesemo membership, Awesemo Plus, if you've yet to do so. We got a lot of free content on the site, particularly a lot of the NFL stuff we've been rolling out over the past couple of weeks. But if you want to get a look at the ownership projections, Alex Baker's his who's on with us by the way Monday through Wednesday, his player projections, the top stack tool, which is awesome, the stat database, the lineup cruncher, fantasy cruncher add-on, articles from Adam, myself, from Josh, from EMAC, from everyone. Ben Rasa does great PGA content, and a lot more. Use the code Deeper Dive when you sign up. It'll get you 50% off your first month, so you can test the water without going all in. All right, one more game. Good timing, huh? We're making good time. This was really not a slate that felt like there was a whole lot to talk about, though.
No, me and Josh got through it pretty quickly this morning too. Yeah, it's a lot of like this pitcher's good. I like this hitter and that hitter and nothing else.
I feel Josh and I would have probably gotten through it at the same amount of time.
Yeah, I think you and Josh would still be talking about the Westbrook trade.
That's a good point. All right, San Diego, Atlanta, Dinelson Lamet, Dallas Keuchel. So the thing with Lamet is that he's going to get ownership because he's super cheap on draft or FanDuel and Yahoo. And a lot of it to me came down to what is this lineup going to look like for the Braves? How many lefties are going to be in it? Because his splits are dramatic against lefties and lefties and righties. He's got four lefties and the pitcher, and then Acuna, Swanson, Donaldson, Riley in the 1, 2, 4, and 6. He is very cheap. We know his strikeout stuff versus righties is great. His stuff in general is phenomenal against righties. But lefties have really, really been a sore spot for Lamet in the short career that he's had at the major league level.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the site. It's a tough matchup against the Braves, not only because they do have, four lefties, like you said, but the righties are Acuna, Swanson, Donaldson, and Riley. So it's not like it's an easy matchup, but his strikeout stuff's just too good to ignore at 5,600 on FanDuel or at $30 on Yahoo. On DraftKings, the matchup is too difficult for me to ignore at 9,800. So really site dependent, but on FanDuel and Yahoo, Lamet would be one of my favorite pitchers just because he can make up for a lot of issues with his strikeout stuff at those price tags.
So what do you see yourself doing with Lamet?
Um, on FanDuel or Yahoo, I would have a lot. On DraftKings, I won't.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you're playing Lamet at that price on DraftKings, you're certifiably insane. It's not exactly a great matchup. Once again, similar to a bunch of pitchers we've talked about already, it's less about the matchup and just about how cheap they are.
Right. Like I would take Lamet at 5,600 over that entire $6,800 price range on FanDuel. I would take him at $30 on Yahoo over Gray, over Duffy, over. I guess it would be similar to Anderson. Like he clearly has a higher ceiling than Anderson does, but the matchup's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the strikeout stuff for him. He does struggle with lefties, like you said, but in 2017 he struck out 28.7% of hitters overall in the majors. In his his 15 innings at AAA this year, he struck out 32%. The strikeout stuff is just really, really good overall, and that's more talent than you're going to find from comparably priced pitchers on Yahoo or FanDuel.
I agree. Dallas Keuchel, I can't imagine you're super stoked about him. So we could talk about, or are you? I mean, because this guy, I actually think he's been pretty lucky since joining the Braves, and that's not saying a ton. Like when you talk about somebody that's missing virtually no bats at all, Dallas Keuchel certainly fits the mold. And, he's always been good at doing one thing, and that's getting ground balls. So I totally understand that. On the season so far, he's getting 78% ground balls against lefties. He's only faced 18 of them, and 56% against righties. Like that is Dallas Keuchel's saving grace. It certainly isn't his ability to get strikeouts. He's not missing any bats to start this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a pitcher that on this particular slate I'm going to target against all that much. I do think that Renfroe stands out and Reyes stands out as big time power bats against a guy who doesn't get a lot of swings and misses. You also get Francisco Mejia hitting sixth at a really cheap price tag, who basically couldn't take the Mike Zunino role in your lineups if you need someone to. Less power than Zunino, but still really, really cheap. But overall, it's just not a spot, not a San Diego team that I'm really looking to take a lot of hitters from. And I'm not looking to roster Keuchel either because even when he was good, he wasn't a strikeout pitcher. Now he's not as good and still not a strikeout pitcher. So not looking to go there.
I feel like from a results standpoint, he's just going to turn into Clayton Richard.
A better Clayton Richard probably, but yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know that he's going to be like Clayton Richard level bad.
Give it a year. No, yeah. What I mean by that is a ton of ground balls, and when you miss bad, and it results in home runs.
I was thinking Mike Leake.
Mike Leake's fine. Clayton Richard's a lefty, so that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable too. But yeah, you're right. Look, Dallas Keuchel, I don't know if I'll ever roster the guy again. In all seriousness,
yeah.
Maybe if now actually I can't think of a spot that I'd really like to roster him at, especially because he's left-handed. It feels like, if you thought about this, all of the really bad teams this year are righty-heavy lineups.
Yeah.
Except maybe the Giants, but they're not that great of a fantasy matchup.
Right. I mean, I wasn't really rostering Keuchel when he was winning Cy Young, so I don't think I'll be doing it now.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Especially as long as he's priced the same way that he was when he was winning Cy Youngs.
Right, exactly. What are your thoughts on hitters here?
I mean, it's some interest in the
Padre bats, but
yeah, the power righties are fine from the Padres, but from the Mets in particular, Freddie Freeman I think is obviously the best play, the best left-handed hitter in the lineup. He's just the best left-handed hitter in the lineup. Brian McCann as a cheap catcher option is fine. But I do have a lot of respect for Lamet overall as a pitcher.
All right. Top stacks before we head out and turn this over to Live Before Lock.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I'm taking a different approach on DraftKings today in large field stuff and not stacking. But if you are stacking, I think that the Dodgers and Red Sox both are just good contrarian stacks. I think that the Yankees are a great stack regardless of ownership.
I'll throw the Brewers in there, too, against a guy that cannot strike anyone out, particularly left-handed hitters. It's been a brutal go for Sean Anderson against lefties. I think it only gets worse today in a homer-friendly park opposed to to Oracle Stadium. It should make a notable difference. All right, that'll do it for us. Hey, before you go or before you switch over to watch the Live Before Lock show with Jake and Spags. They're going to take you up till 7:05. Hit us with a thumbs up if you like the show and you want to see more. It helps us out a lot, and we do greatly appreciate it. And we appreciate you guys hanging out with us today. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, and have a good weekend. Oh, by the way, check out SiriusXM Fantasy Awesemo Radio Saturday, Sunday, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Be on there with my man Manny Laura, breaking everything down, football, basketball, baseball, over the weekend. Aside from that, Adam, myself, and Alex Baker will join you back here on Monday on the Deeper Dive. Good luck tonight.